My name's Marjorie Ellis. I'm 55. And that dinner was the night I decided I was done being treated like a joke in my own home. I'd just come back from a long shift working in the hospital kitchen. My feet were swollen, my back hurt, and all I wanted was to sit down. But instead, I stopped to grab a rotisserie chicken and still made mashed potatoes because, heaven forbid, we didn't eat together like a proper family. When I got home, Jenna was already on her second glass of cheap wine, laughing at something on her phone. Josh was complaining about how slow his Amazon package was. Meanwhile, I quietly laid out the plates like I always do. I usually don't say much when they're in one of their moods. Jenna's boyfriend, Decode, sat there with that silly Bluetooth in his ear, scrolling stock prices like he was some kind of big shot. I knew full well he worked at T-Mobile just last year. I finally sat down and asked, "Can someone pass the gravy?" That's when Jenna leaned back with a smug grin and said, "You know, Mom, if you spent less time cutting coupons and more time learning how to cook, maybe we'd have food with actual flavor." Josh laughed. "She still thinks butter is seasoning," he said. Decode chuckled, right on cue. I just sat there and smiled like it didn't hurt. But oh, it did. It hurt like hell. I'd spent my whole life making do with what little we had: 3 kids, 1 income, 2 jobs, and now they were laughing at me like I was nothing. Jenna grinned and said, "Maybe you should open a restaurant called It's Still Porcalf." They all laughed, and I laughed too. That fake kind of laugh you do to keep the tears from falling. But something inside me cracked that night. Not shattered, just cracked. Later that night, after cleaning up their plates and pushing down my feelings for the 100th time, I sat on the floor of my little room, couldn't sleep, couldn't cry either. I pulled out an old recipe binder I hadn't touched in years. It was full of my mama's handwriting: gumbo, fried catfish, peach cobbler dishes they used to beg me to make when they were little. I flipped through those pages, smudged with grease and love, and thought, if they're going to laugh at me anyway, I might as well try to build something of my own. The next 2 days, I didn't talk to anyone. Not because I was mad, though I was, but because I needed to think. I kept going back to that name. Still, Porcalf. It made me furious because it hit too close to home. That same night, I dug through a dusty box under my bed. Inside was Mama's original recipe binder, the one with stained plastic sleeves and faded notes. Her food wasn't fancy, but it made people feel full and loved. I remembered her saying, "The food you make for people says more about you than any degree ever could." That's when it hit me. I didn't need a fancy kitchen or a chef's degree. Maybe I could just start with what I knew. I pulled out an old notebook I used to write grocery lists in and started jotting down every recipe I could make with my eyes closed. Not for impressing anyone, just real food that meant something. I listed the costs, equipment, how many plates I'd need to sell just to make rent. I didn't tell Jenna. I didn't tell Josh. I didn't tell Decode. I didn't need their smirks or fake encouragement. The next morning, I skipped breakfast and walked 3 blocks down to a quiet little strip of stores that had been nearly empty since COVID hit. There was this one boarded-up place I always passed: Thel's Eats. Been closed for over 20 years. The windows were dusty, the sign half fallen, but something about it made me stop that day. I stood there imagining people lined up for my gumbo or sweet cobbler, not because it was fancy, but because it felt like home. I saw a faded for-lease sign and called the number, not really expecting anything. But a woman named Carol picked up. She was the realtor and asked if I wanted to come see the place. I said yes, without even thinking about how I'd afford it. When I got home, the kids were watching TV. Not one of them looked up. I just walked to my room, shut the door, and made myself a promise. I'm going to open that restaurant, and when I do, they won't be laughing. The next day, I took the early bus to meet Carol. The second I stepped inside the old Thel's Eats building, I saw how rough it really was. Grease clung to the ceilings, tiles were cracked, old stools were flipped in the corner, and the whole place smelled like fryer oil from the 90s. Carol talked fast about zoning and permits, like she didn't think I'd understand any of it. But I listened closely. I wasn't looking at what it was, I was trying to picture what it could be. I ran my fingers across the cracked counter and imagined Mama there, rolling biscuit dough with her strong, worn hands. That was the moment. I knew this wasn't just about food. It was about finally being seen, about making something that was mine, one plate at a time. I knew for a fact Carol had never set foot in that place before. She finally looked at me and said, Most people don't even finish the tour before walking out. You really want to take this on? And I told her, I already have. I didn't ask about the deposit. I didn't care what the average rent was in the area. I just told her I needed a few days to pull things together. She handed me the papers and told me to call when I was ready. I knew what that meant. I had to come up with $5,000 fast, and I didn't even have 500. When I got home, I started tearing the house apart, checking old coat pockets, digging through drawers, looking inside every purse I'd ever used. I scraped together just under $200 in crumpled bills and coins. Then I looked at the 65 TV in the living room, the one Josh insisted we needed, even though he's never paid a single bill. I posted it online for sale that same night. By morning, I had 4 offers. Sold it to a guy named Reggie from across town. Josh came home and saw the empty wall, and boy, he lost it. Started yelling about how disrespectful it was to sell something we all use. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You don't pay rent here. It's not ours, it's mine." He slammed his door and didn't talk to me for 2 days. I didn't care. Next, I sold Jenna's old treadmill, the one she bought during her short-lived fitness influencer phase that lasted all of 2 weeks. Then I called my credit union and pulled the last bit of money from my tiny retirement account, just enough to hit that $5,000 goal, with a couple hundred left over. When I went back to sign the lease, Carol stared at me like I'd done the impossible. I walked out of her office with the keys to a broken-down restaurant. No staff, no equipment, no business plan, just mama's recipes and this deep-down gut feeling that I could somehow make it work. I didn't tell the kids anything. I just walked straight to the building, stood in the middle of that wreck of a place, and whispered to myself, "Welcome to your second life, Marge. Don't screw it up." But once I held those keys in my hand, reality came crashing in hard. The lights didn't even work. The kitchen was in pieces. The place smelled like old fryer grease and disappointment. I started cleaning by myself because I couldn't afford to hire anyone. I used off-brand cleaner and dollar store gloves that ripped within minutes. I scrubbed until my fingers were sore and my back locked up. And the worst part, no one at home even noticed I was gone. I found a broken fryer in the back that probably hadn't been touched since the 90s. It took me 2 full days just to get the kitchen sink to stop leaking. I watched YouTube videos about restaurant inspections, read Reddit threads on opening soul food spots, and wrote my checklist on the back of an old cereal box because I couldn't find a single clean notebook, just ones full of old bills and scribbles. The first time I tried cooking in that kitchen, it was a mess. I nearly set off the fire alarm, burnt the sweet potatoes, and spilled gumbo all over the greasy floor trying to carry it to the counter. I wanted to scream, and I did, once or twice, but no one heard me. And honestly, that made it worse. I worked in silence, cleaned in silence, cooked in silence. After a week, I hadn't made a single dollar and only had $73 left in my checking account. I had a tiny flicker of pride when I managed to schedule the health inspection, but it disappeared the second the inspector walked in. Saw the cracked ceiling tiles, the chipped countertop, and the rusty walk-in cooler. He handed me a list of things to fix before I could even think about opening. I smiled, signed the paper, and then sat in the back alone, crying into a cold biscuit until I felt absolutely nothing but tired. That night, I still went home and made dinner like I always did. No one asked where I'd been. Jenna talked about drama with some influencer, Josh grumbled about the Wi-Fi, and I just sat there thinking about how loud their voices whined, how little they meant to me now. The next morning, I went back to the restaurant and started again, slower this time, more careful. I spent 2 whole hours just making one dish, Mama's gumbo. I didn't rush. I didn't take shortcuts. I just tried to do it right. When I tasted it, I cried again, but not because I messed it up. Because it tasted exactly like hers. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Maybe I wasn't chasing a dumb dream. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally bringing something back that should have never been lost. I finally got the green light from the health inspector, and even though I should have been excited, I could barely sleep. Not because I was nervous, because I had way too much to do, and not enough hands or time to get it all done. I wasn't about to let some last-minute detail ruin the chance I'd worked so hard for. That night, I scrubbed the kitchen 3 more times just to be sure. I used a Sharpie and duct tape to set up the menu board. I printed out paper menus on my old printer, the one that kept jamming every other page. I even bought a $20 apron from the thrift store just so I could at least look like I knew what I was doing. I posted a little announcement on the local Facebook group, soft opening from 12 to 4. Nothing fancy, just gumbo, fried catfish, and peach cobbler. I told myself, if 5 people show up, I'll call it a win. The morning of, I showed up early with 2 grocery bags in one hand and Mama's old recipe binder in the other. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely set up the tip jar without shaking. Noon came and went. Nobody walked in. I pretended to reorganize plates and checked my phone every 3 minutes, like maybe there'd be a message. There wasn't. I was just about to close up when the door creaked open. A woman stepped in, short, thick glasses, holding her phone up like she was trying to find a signal. She smiled and asked, "This the spot I saw on Tamika's page?" I blinked. I didn't know any Tamika, but before I could ask more, 2 more people walked in behind her, then a family of 3, and suddenly, the place was filling up so fast I could barely keep up. Turns out, Tamika Johnson, a girl I went to high school with who runs a food blog now, had stopped by the night before while I was prepping and snapped a few photos through the window. Didn't even come inside. She posted them with a caption, "Y'all, something real is coming back to this town." And boom, it took off. People were curious. People were hungry. And I was the only soul food spot around. I ran out of catfish in the first hour. I had to ask one of the customers to grab more from the back freezer while I stirred gumbo with one hand and boxed cobbler with the other. I messed up a few orders, forgot to give change to one man, and dropped an entire tray of cornbread by the fryer. But nobody yelled. Nobody complained. They just smiled and said, "Tastes like home." And then, in the middle of all that chaos, I saw her, Jenna, standing at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching. She walked up to the counter and said, "Need a waitress, or you gonna keep doing it all by yourself?" I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at her, really looked. For the first time in years, she wasn't making fun. She wasn't rolling her eyes. She was just there, waiting, maybe even hoping. I nodded, handed her a stack of takeout containers, and said, "Start with table 5. Having Jenna there helped more than I expected. She was fast, she could talk to anybody, and she loved the attention, which actually worked in our favor. A lot of folks started showing up just to see the girl from TikTok who posted a video saying, "Y'all, my mom's food will make you forgive your ex." That video blew up. Over 50,000 views in 2 days. Suddenly, people were tagging friends, driving in from towns I'd never even heard of, asking for specials I hadn't even thought of yet. I let Jenna take over our social media, and the more followers we got, the more orders came in. Even Josh eventually showed up, talking big about logistics and streamlining the flow of service, which cracked me up since 2 weeks earlier he couldn't even find the ketchup in the fridge. But I let him handle the supply runs and keep track of inventory, mostly because I was getting tired and I didn't want to burn out just as things were picking up. And for a while, it felt good, really good. Customers were lining up before we opened. A local radio station gave us a shout out. Even a small news team came and called us the comeback diner of the year. I even caught Decode wiping down tables once, acting like he belonged there. I had to bite my tongue not to throw him out on the spot. But then the little things started happening. Receipts went missing. I saw Jenna whispering to some guy I didn't know out in the parking lot. Josh started acting weird about our payment system, saying stuff like, "We need to move fast before the brand plateaus." And that's when I felt it again, that quiet twist in my gut. The one that had warned me back at that dinner table. Something wasn't right. Not this time either. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. And they didn't know what I was willing to do to protect what I'd built. Not yet. I asked Jenna one night what she meant by expansion plans after overhearing her on the phone. She waved it off, acting like I was just being dramatic. A week later, a customer asked if it was true that we were opening 2 new locations. I laughed and said no until she showed me a flyer she'd found online. Still, poor kitchen, coming soon. I didn't make that flyer. And I sure as hell didn't approve anything like that. That night, after closing, I stayed late and started digging through the back end of our online sales. What I found made my stomach twist. Duplicate orders were being routed to a different PayPal account. Ads were being bought using my name, but the money was going into a business account I didn't recognize. When I checked the email tied to it, my heart sank. It was Jenna's. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I brought her into the kitchen and showed her everything. She didn't even deny it. Just looked at me and said, "I was trying to build something bigger." "You wouldn't understand," I told her flat out. "If you wanted to build something, you should have asked, not stolen." I shut down our online pages, froze every account, and fired both Jenna and Josh on the spot. Jenna cried, saying I was ruining everything. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You already did." I locked up the restaurant alone that night, counting the tips by hand like I used to before they got involved. I told myself, no matter how much it hurts, I'd rather build this slow and real than fast and fake. But after they were gone, things didn't quiet down like I hoped. If anything, they got worse. I started combing through the books, not just the big numbers, but every single line, every vendor, every receipt. And what I found felt like getting punched in the gut. They hadn't just tried to run off with my brand. They had been slowly bleeding my business dry for weeks. Josh had set up a separate vendor account, charging me inflated prices for everyday supplies like to-go boxes and condiments. The payments were going through a third-party company I didn't recognize until I Googled it and realized it was linked to one of his old high school buddies who used to hang around our house. Jenna had been posting sponsored content using our business name, getting paid directly to her own account while telling me it was all just exposure. They weren't building the business. They were using it, treating it like a stepping stone to something better. And I couldn't believe I'd let it happen right under my nose. I felt humiliated. Not just because they betrayed me, but because I trusted them again, after everything. I spent a full Saturday cross-checking receipts, matching payments, and printing it all out. By the end of the day, I had a binder stuffed with proof so thick I didn't know whether to cry or call the police. I didn't want to press charges. I just wanted them gone. That night, I walked into the living room, where they were eating leftover Chinese takeout, slammed the binder on the table, and said, "This is what you two cost me." Jenna tried to play dumb. Josh rolled his eyes and decode. He actually had the nerve to say, "Everyone does a little side hustle." That's when I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, hit record, and calmly told them, "You're done. You're out of my business and out of my home. If you touch anything again, I'll take this whole stack to a lawyer." Josh said I was being petty. Jenna called me bitter. I didn't say a word. I just stared them down until they stood up and left. Then I locked the door behind them, deleted their access to everything: socials, emails, payment systems, cut every digital string they could pull. I sat down in that quiet living room and told myself something I wish I'd learned sooner. Family doesn't mean blind loyalty, especially not to people who treat you like an option while you're giving them your whole damn heart. That night, I rewrote the menu, simpler, cleaner, just the real dishes that mattered. And I made a promise to myself: no one touches this place again unless they respect it like I do. I built it from nothing but scraps. And I wasn't about to let it fall apart just because my own kids thought they could shortcut their way into a spotlight. But cutting Jenna and Josh off didn't solve everything. It stirred up a storm. Fallout from everything they'd done started leaking into the real business. Suppliers emailed me saying they didn't know which brand name to use. Some orders were still going to that fake still pour kitchen label Jenna had set up. One day, a delivery truck showed up for a location that didn't even exist, and the driver started yelling in front of customers over a missing invoice I'd never even seen. I tried to clean it all up myself, but every time I patched one hole, another opened up. People started messaging the page, asking why there were two websites, asking why someone was offering pre-orders for a menu I hadn't approved. It was like they'd left behind a digital bomb set to go off slowly, piece by piece, like they wanted to break me on the way out. And then came the final straw, because the business was getting bigger than me. Orders were coming in faster than I could handle. Lines were wrapping around the block nearly every day. People weren't just showing up for food anymore, they were showing up for comfort, for connection, for something that felt like home. I was still cooking from the heart, still leaning on Mama's recipes. But it was becoming clear I couldn't run this whole place by myself anymore. Not if I wanted it to last. So one quiet evening, I picked up my phone and called Jenna first. She didn't answer right away, just let it ring until voicemail picked up. I didn't leave a message. 10 minutes later, she called back, voice low, like she wasn't sure I'd actually answer. I told her to come in the next morning at 8 a.m. sharp, not a minute later. Then I called Josh and said the same. They both showed up early. No flashy clothes, no fake smiles. Just quiet and serious. I didn't give a long speech. I didn't rehash the past. I just handed Jenna a stack of receipts to file and told Josh the back fridge needed inventory. No warm welcome, no big moment, just work. And they did it, quietly, properly, respectfully. We didn't talk much that day, but the silence didn't feel heavy this time. It felt steady, like bricks finally being laid down in the right order. A few weeks later, business was booming. Margie's Revival Kitchen had become a real fixture in the neighborhood. We added new dishes, started doing Sunday plates with rotating specials, and even got featured in a city magazine under local legends. Tamika, bless her, kept managing the front like a queen, and Jenna surprisingly became a favorite with the regulars. Turns out, when she's not chasing clout, the girl can actually hustle. Josh, too quiet, but efficient, slowly earning back my trust one task at a time. I still kept the books locked in a drawer, only I had the key to. Still changed all the passwords, every week, but I started breathing easier. One night, after a long day, I sat alone at table 3, the one closest to the window, and flipped through Mama's old recipe binder again. The pages were more worn now, more stained, but every note still hit me the same. I thought about how far I'd come, from being laughed at in my own kitchen, to owning one with my name on it. From tears on the floor to joy in every bite. And I told myself something I wish every woman who ever felt dismissed, disrespected, or overlooked could hear. You are not too old, too poor, or too late. You're just getting started. And baby, so was I. That last line stuck with me, and if that ain't something, I don't know what, because truly, it is something. It's everything. I made Jenna and Josh sign employment contracts not because I wanted to be cold, but because I needed them to understand this was no longer a family kitchen where people came and went without consequence. It was a business, one with my name on the front. So I laid out the rules in plain ink. No family favors, no shortcuts, and no drama. One mistake, and you're out. No arguments, no guilt trips. To my surprise, they didn't argue. They just nodded, signed, and got to work. Josh handled inventory and deliveries only this time. He brought back clean receipts, kept careful records, and didn't so much as whisper about a side hustle. Jenna ran the front again, but she did it the right way, honest, sharp, present. She took orders with a smile, managed our socials without chasing clout, and even posted behind-the-scenes clips of me cooking that brought in new customers. And to me, 'cause she stayed right beside me. Not as a business partner, not as an investor, just as a real friend, the kind who doesn't ask what's in it for her. She believed in me before I believed in myself. That kind of loyalty. It's rare, and it's sacred. We didn't try to reinvent anything. We stuck to the food that got me through the hardest years of my life. We didn't serve trends, we served truth. Mama's mac and cheese, smothered chops, sweet tea with that little splash of lemon like she used to make. No frills, no fluff. Just comfort on a plate. Then we did something new, something Mama would have loved. We set up a community table every Saturday. Anyone who needed a hot meal, no questions asked, could sit and eat for free. Because I knew what it felt like to go to bed hungry with bills on the table and no one noticing. That table wasn't about charity. It was about dignity. By our 6-month mark, we'd passed $100,000 in revenue. I didn't even know how to say that number out loud without tearing up. I was invited to speak at a local women's entrepreneur panel. I stood there in my thrift store blazer and told the truth. I started with a binder full of old recipes, a fryer that barely worked, and a whole lot of people who didn't believe in me, including my own kids. But here I am. And then came one of the best nights of my life, our first family and friends dinner in the freshly painted dining room. I had Josh setting the tables, Jenna adjusting the lights, and I stood in the back watching it all happen, like it was a scene from a movie I never thought I'd get to live. I served Mama's fried pork chops with collards and creamy mac, just like she used to make. The guests, they weren't influencers or reporters. They were people who showed up when I had nothing. The nurse who used to cover my shifts, the landlord who looked the other way when I came up short on rent. Folks who saw me not as some tired mamba, as someone still standing. That night, when it was all over, I found Jenna folding napkins without anyone asking. Josh was stacking chairs like it was something he wanted to do. And I didn't say a word. I just stood there for a moment, soaking it in. Then I turned off the lights myself, locked that front door, and thought back to the first time I stood in that broken down building, knees shaking, heart unsure, asking myself if I'd made a mistake. Now, I've got a place filled with love, paychecks in my kids' hands, and a name that means something not just to me, but to everyone who walks through my doors. People used to say I was poor, lazy, just another washed-up mom who didn't know when to quit, but now, they come through my doors, order my food, ask for me by name, and they walk out, full in more ways than one. And if that ain't something, I don't know what is. That's today's story. If it touched you, leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget, share your own life lesson in the comments below.